Well, the city is currently in the midst of some of the largest water system improvements that we've made over the years. And there really are two major projects that are involved here. One is the installation of a new well, well number 10. So those of you on the council for a while have heard plenty about well number 10. It is a project that has been drilled and is currently in design for its second phase. The second large project going at the same time is the replacement of the existing 6 water booster stations within the system. Water booster stations are those pumping stations that increase the pressure of the system, going from the low pressure system that's throughout most of the city to then essentially lift that water into the upper areas of the community, the hills on the outskirts of the town itself. Those are areas that the low pressure system doesn't serve adequately, and so you need to boost the pressure in order to have enough domestic flow, but also to have sufficient fire flow available within those zones. They're all confined zones, so there's a booster station that serves a zone, and generally that's the only place water comes into the system. What we have found over the years is the boosters that we have are inadequate. They're very difficult to maintain. They're definitely showing their age. Some of them date well back into the 1960s. And for the really major issue is, frankly, they don't have enough capacity for fire flow. So the city applied for loan funding through the State Revolving Loan Fund as administered by the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, and we were successful in obtaining those to provide some of the funding for both of these projects, well 10 and the booster stations. The first phase of the booster station project is underway, and we're replacing 3 of the stations right now. And so just for a touch of background for folks, I'm going to show you a little bit of what those look like today, and that'll give you a bit of an idea of what phase 2 will involve, which is the subject of this particular item on the agenda in this design services contract. So of the 3 stations, one is the Ponderosa Booster Station. Ooh, get that out. It is located on the north end of town, so we're up on the area of Ponderosa, and this is the station here up on North Orchard. It serves, all this you see in yellow is the high pressure zone, and it goes all the way out to the very north end of the city. And this gives you an idea of what the station looks like. There it is. Not much. It's because it's all underground right now. So this big concrete box, if you will, with these couple of hatches that look like that, that's how we get into it. It's actually located in the street right away in this underground vault. So that's what it looks like from above, and when you get inside, that's what it looks like today. This particular station has one domestic size pump. That's the one that runs all the time, and literally all the time, to provide pressure and flow to the domestic users. So all the household use, the lawn irrigation, washing machines, all of that runs off one pump consistently 24/7, 365 days a year for that entire neighborhood. There's no redundancy. This is the fire flow pump in this particular area. There's one pump. As you can tell, there's really no room to add pumps. It's a bit tight for operations and maintenance. You can see some of the electronic systems back here are starting to show age. They're just very difficult stations. So they need to be updated. They need to be enhanced to add fire flow, and the regulations over the years have changed to the point we cannot do these underground anymore. So we have to go to above ground facilities. So the replacement site for this particular station is going to be on the north end. And I should back up just a minute and say I messed up my order here. I'm going to talk to you about the 2 stations in phase 2, and then I'll show you some examples of phase 1. Okay. So this Ponderosa station in phase 2, the site we've selected is just north of the Ponderosa intersection, Orchard Avenue. This is the Peekaboo Estates subdivision, so Lanny Lane going through Peekaboo Street. This has all been under construction the last 2 summers, and as part of that subdivision, we worked with the property owner to acquire Tract A. Tract A will become the new pump station site. We worked with that property owner and developer in terms of getting the pipe network in place while he was installing water lines here in the subdivision to get it all plumbed for a station to go at this location. So that'll be the new spot for Ponderosa Lift Station. And just a quick aerial shot, again, the road for Lanny, and then that site right there. The Ponderosa station is today right at that spot. So back there they are.
So I got a quick question here
Circle.
for you. That underground station you showed us where that pump runs every single day, 24 hours a day.
Has to pump.
How many years has that been there, that station?
That particular one probably dates, I think, into the late 80s, give or take. So it's actually a little bit newer than some of the others. It just has to
25
do
years old?
something in that range. And and the pumps over the years have been replaced periodically because they do wear out.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, okay.
Right. So again, just to zoom in a little bit, so there's where the existing station is, underground. That was the site for the new station. Okay, Indian Hills is the second. You heard me say at the beginning there are 6 stations we're replacing, but now I'm going to talk about 5. And the reason for that is the Mosier station, which exists today, will be decommissioned because we're going to connect the Mosier High Pressure District into the Vista High Pressure District and make it one. So the Vista station is sized to address both. So we'll go down to 5 stations rather than 6. So in phase 2, there are 2 stations, Ponderosa, Indian Hills. Indian Hills is an interesting one. The location is here. So Steiner Avenue is just to the north off the screen. This is the location, again, what you see in yellow highlight here, all the way really over to the east a ways, is the high pressure zone within Indian Hills. And very similar construction, again, underground vault with the facilities inside. In this case, the electronics are sitting up here in the open next to the apartment complex, little vents in the sidewalk for venting the space. Again, the access, very similar type construction and design, and the inside. You will note these are clean, and you do see some leakage here and there on the station. So the staff have done a pretty good job overall trying to maintain what they've got. It's just that they're reaching that stage that maintenance-wise are becoming a real problem. But again, the lack of capacity is the big issue here, and that's really what's driving this as much as anything is the fire flow. Just another shot on the inside. So the concept for Indian Hills, we've looked at a number of locations. The current station's right here where this little blue star is located. We've done hydraulic analysis of a couple potential sites. We started looking at sites up here around this location, thinking, well, can we talk to the property owners of the apartment complex? We actually looked at a site over here that belongs to the church that they don't know we looked at, but it's just on the side of the road. It's just one of those grassy spots at the base of the hill. It's like, well, maybe. That didn't go too far. And then we identified some possibilities to the south. So this is Southview Drive and the Grove apartment complex right here. And there's a site here that's kind of at the base of the hill. And this is very steep here, so it's not really buildable. But it starts to flatten as you work east. And we're looking at a site that's just where it's flattened enough. It's a big enough site maybe for a pump station, probably not quite big enough for a home. The homes would continue on to the east. So the thought was that we could perhaps create a site there, pull water out of the Southview line, bring it up the hill to Indian Hills Drive, and let that be the pump station site. Initial discussions with the property owners, that seems to be a positive possibility on a location. The other location we looked at is here, and there's a little stub of Alice Street. Most people have never heard of it, but Alice Street is right there, just short little bit, one lot deep, constructed, and just dead ends at the top of the hill. The long-range plan is for Alice Street to come all the way down to Police River Drive. We have city park property right here today, and so we're said, well, there's a potential location that we could coexist perhaps with a park and put a site in here and then pull off Police River Drive, main that ends right there, and come up to Indian Hills. All these lines you see in red would be mains that would need to be constructed with the booster stations. And the reason for that, and this was contemplated up front, is that this existing 6-inch distribution system up here is just too small. To try to put the kind of fire flow that we need up in this area to meet the fire requirements, we need to upsize these mains. So all these areas in red would be where we'd be replacing existing main, or in this case, constructing new main down the hill or down the hill here. Okay. So the contract that's before you this evening is for the design of these 2 booster stations and the construction management assistance to the city staff for these 2 stations. But it also includes the design and construction management for these water lines. So we brought it all into one design contract. Now, to give you a little bit of an idea of what these things look like, because I know folks have asked the question about there's not much in a packet about what they might be. So what would they be? Well, here's some examples. The Vista Station, and this one's a little bit unique. And the reason I say that is because it is a shed-style roof that just kind of drops off into the hillside. Due to the location of this, which is up next to the Vista Reservoir, it's behind us in the picture, the fact that it's up on the ridgetop and it's kind of skylined up there, you can see the reservoir and there's trees on the hill. We wanted to try to set it into the hillside a bit. That's why it's into this slope here, to try to lessen its profile, bring it down, keep it as invisible as we can, frankly, to on the skyline for the neighbors that are around it. There will be more trees planted up in this area to help with that as well, and replace some that we had to take out to fit this in. So it's going to be tucked back into the hillside, but the method of construction, which is a CMU block, colored block with what's called a standing seam metal roofing, will be similar amongst all the stations. Okay, so you can see there we've got a one color stone for the body and a different color of CMU split face block for the highlights. This building technique is pretty consistent throughout all the stations. Now the one at White Avenue is much more visible because it is literally right on White Avenue, which is right here. You can see all the new apartments off there behind, and this is the bus barn is just over here to the left, the dog park just beyond it. So this is the more typical looking station. Taylor and then the two new stations in Phase 2 will look kind of like this. They'll have slight nuances in terms of color and dormers, that type of thing. But these are the ones that we're trying to give them a little bit of character so they fit into the neighborhood, without getting the budgets completely out of whack on a building. But they are still the same split face CMU blocks. Here we've got a little bit of a block accent on the corners just to give it a little bit of character, a couple of dormers in this case. Glass block here just to let light into the building. Eventually there will be landscaping all the way around this to help address some of that. So here's just another view. Green roof on this one. This is a darker, they call it a black stone, but it's kind of a dark gray, if you will, with more of a goldish tan in here. And that color scheme is pretty prevalent throughout. This is a generator. All of these sites will also have backup power, which is something we currently do not have at any of our pump stations. And we're trying to get backup emergency power at most of our facilities throughout the city for water and sewer systems. So they look like this. They're fully insulated. They're soundproof. They're weather resistant. So they're designed to be out there. The only time these run is when there's a power outage or when they're going through the periodic maintenance cycle, because they have to run, every once in a while for about 15, 20 minutes just to keep the gas fresh and make sure everything's functioning. And that way, when they're needed, they turn right on. Okay. Just the inside, what these look like, a little different. These are certainly bigger. Part of the reason for that is we're trying to make sure we have adequate pumping for now and into the future. And for redundancy. In this particular case, there's 3 pipes here that come out of the ground. These are domestic flow facilities, and so this little pump here is a domestic pump. So instead of one, we've got a second one right here. In this case, this third one is blank, so it doesn't go through, but eventually there would be a third one right there. This particular station is sized to accommodate future growth. In that particular zone, we're seeing growth like the Ridgeview Estates number 2 subdivision that's not yet developed, and there may be others out there that will continue to add demand. So we set it up to allow for that future expansion by just dropping in another pump run between that in that blank. And then the 2 fire pumps at the far end, that's what they look like, much bigger vertical type pumps designed to give much greater capacity and the redundancy that we want to have for fire flow situations. Pretty simple, simple interiors, just block, updated electrical systems, of course, and just another view. These glass blocks really help with the lighting in these spaces. The lights are on as well, but they do bring a lot of light into the building, and they don't take any electricity. So from an efficiency perspective, they're beneficial. With the landscaping, ultimately, we'll shield it a bit, if you will, with landscaping all the way around. The Taylor station, there you go. That is the existing station. That's not the new one. This is the only one that actually has a structure, although half of it is actually below grade. You go downstairs when you walk into the building, very tight, very small. But if you turn around from this location, that's the station under construction today. Very similar look to the other. The real difference here is that instead of the darker block being the body, we went to the lighter brown, kind of goldish block, with the black trim and a black roof on this particular one. Black and gold, proximity to the university. So in this case, the generator's here. This will be a paved access drive at this location and access into the building. And the interior of that one, very similar. In this case, all 3 domestic pumps are in place, 2 fire pumps as well. A lot of things in that space. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I
And
can't.
this was on Public Works and Finance too, on
It
January
was.
8th. so-
Yeah, and it was great that you brought the pictures. I think especially for people to see below ground. And then we had talked about the water, but I couldn't remember if we, out of curiosity, I had started thinking about security.
Yes.
And did you say there were cameras, or is that normally ever needed? Or
We
on the outside?
We generally don't talk about specifics of our security systems within the community, but we will have security on these buildings, as we do on all of our facilities. And so, yes, it is something that is built into the system. I can tell you that we have traditionally not used cameras within the city of Moscow because some people have concerns with those, so we use other forms.
Okay. Thank you.
Randy?
Is there a projection for, do you think these 5 stations, when they're all completed, will service all of Moscow for how long? Is there any way to know that? Or do you think another one will be needed at some point? Again, that's just out of curiosity, not to make a decision tonight, but.
Right. The 5 stations serve all the currently developed high-pressure zones within the city. As I mentioned on a couple of them, we do have room for capacity expansion as the systems grow, particularly the White Avenue, as I talked about, with Ridgeview and other areas. The Vista Station also has capacity expansion capability. We're anticipating that up in that area of Fairview and the east end of the Rolling Hills developments, we'll see further development out into the Hayden and the Kenworthy properties out that way someday. And this, the Vista Station would also serve that area. Beyond that, the topography is such that it drops off a little bit before you then get to a new high somewhere. So most likely we wouldn't see much more expansion of these sites other than those 2 examples. And then we kind of leapfrog over another low pressure zone to some future ridge development, maybe 20 years out. So they should service quite well for those areas of expansion in those two zones in particular. Overall, the life of these stations, obviously the structures will be around for 50 years probably or more. Then with periodic maintenance and updates to the electronics and pump systems, the internal should work for probably that long as well.
So with the Indian Hills sites, I know you have 2 potential locations right now. How does it work if it were to be the more northern one that is privately owned? How do you work that out with a developer?
Yeah, any time that we're looking for property of that nature, we approach property owners and talk to them about what our thoughts are and whether or not they would have any interest in working with us about securing a site. It varies. Some property owners have no interest whatsoever, and that's perfectly fine. Others, and we've been actually quite successful with this, I guess. Others, understand the needs when we talk about it, and generally have been pretty willing to talk to us. Sometimes that ends up in an acquisition, and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, there's the Indian Hills. Actually, there's even another potential site that I didn't mention. So I think we've got several possibilities there. We're trying to find the one that makes the most sense for the property owner, but also for us is the most economical in terms of what it costs to acquire the site and then what it costs to get infrastructure from there up to the Indian Hills Drive area.
Okay, other questions for Les before we?
I can get one more.
Okay.
Now with the Ponderosa site, the property that is just to the south of that with the home on it, has the city talked with them, or is that in the plan, or is that required, or?
The discussions of acquisition of this site took many forms. We talked about a site here, we talked about a site here, we talked about a site here, some combination of this property. So yeah, there were some discussions from with the representatives of this property, and then of course all of the Pica property. There were a couple options, pros and cons to each of them. In the end, we felt this is the one that probably would work best in terms of the size that we needed. And frankly, due to the alignment of the roadway needing to meet this intersection, this became a more difficult lot to develop into a residential standard lot, just because of the depth and the shape. And so it actually worked quite well in the end to acquire that particular site. And we have acquired that site.
Okay.
Okay, all right. With that, I'd move to approve the task order agreement with JUB Engineers Incorporated.
Second.
Okay. Have a motion by Catherine, a second by Gina to approve the task order agreement with JUB Engineers Incorporated. Start the roll, Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay. Very good. Thank you, Les.